Hello, and welcome to our 2021 World Suicide Prevention Day event, brought to you by the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Calhoun County. My name is Scott Tishmer. I am the Suicide Prevention Facilitator with Summit Point, and we're going to start by sharing a little bit about what this program will entail, which will include sharing a little bit about the coalition, who we are, what we do, and talk about ways you can get involved in suicide prevention in the community. We'll also be sharing resources and new initiatives that will be rolling out in the future. Throughout this event, you'll hear from multiple community members whose lives have been impacted by suicide in various ways. And the end of our program will be with the candlelighting ceremony, which people across the world throughout the entire day are lighting a candle in their window at 8 p.m. in everybody's respective time zones in honor of our loved ones, in support of suicide prevention, and just to support all survivors of suicide. So who is the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Calhoun County? Well, we are a multidisciplinary coalition with volunteers representing nearly 30 agencies in the county, and that ranges from medical health, behavioral health, education, nonprofits, veterans services, the library, as well as in the private sector and the Chamber of Commerce. So really, when we talk about suicide prevention, we need to start thinking about it as a community responsibility where we work together. So the Suicide Prevention Coalition of Calhoun County, or the SPCCC, just completed our strategic plan earlier this year. So I want to share a little bit about what our goals and what look like and what we'll be working on. So starting to the left, community-driven and data-formed. What does that mean? Basically, that's what's going to drive all of our goals and our objectives. So we want to be community-driven. The idea, again, that it takes a community, that it's all of our responsibility. And we also want to use the community's expertise. In addition to that, we also need to know better data as far as who's being impacted by suicide so that we can know where to focus our efforts. So that goal will be driving the additional goals. So starting with education, one of the big things we're going to be pushing is a training called QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, and I'll share more about that in just a bit. But increasing education about suicide prevention within the community and within our behavioral health systems. And then supports. We want to be able to increase supports for those impacted by suicide, whether it's individuals experiencing suicidal thoughts, individuals who have survived a suicide attempt, or who have lost a loved one to suicide. So in that, what we will be eventually creating are support groups, specifically for suicide loss survivors, suicide attempt survivors. So those will be things that we're working on. The fourth goal you see on there is safety. So promoting lethal means safety, which could include reduction, could just include minimizing risk. So we're going to be working on a couple different ways with this. We already have medication disposal sites throughout the community. We also want to start focusing on increasing firearm safety. So developing safe remote options where people can store firearms for a short period of time, just to make sure that they get through a crisis. What we know as far as suicide prevention is that one of the proven ways to save lives is to put as much time and distance between a person and any potential lethal means. So I mentioned QPR. QPR can be looked at as a bystander intervention, very much like CPR. So the idea of CPR, individuals who are trained are able to recognize warning signs, and once they see those warning signs, they immediately intervene. QPR operates in the same way. So knowing the warning signs, so the 3 steps are questioning the person directly about suicide. Very often we're afraid to ask the question, and we're afraid to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So asking the question, persuading the person to accept help, letting them know that you're there for them, listening to them, giving them your time, your caring attention, and then referring them. So just like with CPR, the bystander provides that immediate support while we wait to get professional assistance involved. Same thing with QPR. So while we're providing support as a caring individual, we're also bringing in additional supports, maybe professional supports, to help them as well. So we're currently offering this weekly throughout Suicide Prevention Month, and we'll be offering it at least monthly thereafter. our virtual offering is 60 minutes. And then we can also do more longer extended versions of this. And if you have an organization, business, a place you would like to have trained, we can come to you. We currently have 2 instructors for QPR in the county. One of our other goals is working on building a team where we have a greater capacity so that we can train as many people as possible in Calhoun County. Share some of the resources available. So Credible Mind is a free online resource that's available to anybody in Calhoun County. You can access that by going to summitpoint.crediblemmind.com, where you can check out podcasts, books, videos on many behavioral health topics. You can take assessments, or if you are a behavioral a care professional or provider, you can also get resources on how to help others. So that is a free resource for anybody in the county. And then really want to talk about First Step and our 1-800 24/7 crisis line. First Step is a psychiatric urgent care. We're very lucky to have such a facility. Many communities don't have that. So 24/7, regardless of insurance, can walk through that doors to get support. So that is the entry point for services in Calhoun County, or calling that 24/7 number. And also with that, anybody can call regardless of age, regardless of insurance. So when we're struggling, or if there's somebody in our lives that we're worried about, making that call together, going in together can be really important. And then the last thing I want to say about Suicide Prevention Month and how you can get involved all month long. We have a chalk campaign where throughout the community, and we had a great participation last year and this year already as well, sharing messages of hope and also putting out the resources like the 1-800 number, the crisis helpline, and sharing information about QPR. So if you want to participate in that, get a hold of us. You can check us out. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Suicide Prevention Coalition CC. So get involved. It's all of our responsibility. Get trained in QPR, get your family trained in QPR, get your neighbors trained in QPR. Again, eventually we'll have the capacity to come to organizations as well. So for our first community member we're going to hear from today, we will hear from Stephanie Boyd, who is going to share her story and how she has been impacted by suicide. Stephanie, it's good to see you.
It's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So I'm going to start off by asking, how has your life been impacted by suicide?
You know, since high school, I really can't remember a time when it hasn't been impacted. I can remember all the way back in actually middle school where someone came to me and said, I feel like I'm going to kill myself. And they were very detailed about it. Like, we're going to go to swimming class and I might decide that I don't want to come back up. And I remember how scared I was. And I don't know if I thought it was a joke or not. And she jumped in and I was like, no, get her. And so I think from that moment, something inside me triggered an emotion as it relates to that. And then I had an immediate family member, 16 years old, that had death by suicide. And then I can remember a pivotal moment in my life. I think I was 21 when my mom died, and she was my everything. And when she died, I felt lost. I felt hopeless, no purpose. It was a very dark moment in my life, to the point where I had in my mind what I was going to do to just end it all. And I was driving in my car, and I know it was something spiritual just that stopped me from ending my life. And from that point on, it's always been at the forefront of my mind, the dark patterns and the hopelessness, and how hard life can be, where you just feel like it's just easier never to wake up. So it's been a huge impact on my life.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I know we've talked before, but I don't think I had made that connection, because I've obviously struggled with thoughts of suicide too, but it was the loss of my father around that same age that was a really big impact in my life. So I was really appreciate you sharing that. But what does suicide prevention mean to you?
It means bringing forward the awareness that it does come through our mind. I think, there's that pivotal age, that 18 to 25, where you don't know what your purpose is. And now moving forward with social media just being a lot more in our face than it was when I was in high school, it just means talking about it and being okay to talk about it. And it means erasing the stigma that it's not okay to talk about it, especially in the African-American culture. I was raised to not say anything. If you're going through things, just keep it in or keep it in the family. I don't remember a lot of people from my culture committing suicide because the spiritual backgrounds that we have was you don't talk about it. You're going to hell. You keep it hush hush. And so just to let people know that there are myths about suicide, to bring the awareness, to erase the stigma, to do whatever we can to let people know that it's a feeling that a lot of people may struggle more than they want to tell, and it's okay to talk about it. And so I think that's what I think about as it relates to prevention.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when you talked about kind of church and religion, on the one hand, of being kind of a protective factor, but it's also sounds like a double-edged sword where it's something that can keep you, sustain you, hold you on to life, but then also can really shut down the conversation where we end up struggling on our own in isolation instead of being with others to get support. Right. So talking about prevention, you and I teach a class QPR, and we've taught a couple community classes now, and we'll continue doing that moving forward. But do you mind just sharing a little bit about, I guess, what that class is?
So it is a way, first of all, QPR stands for question, persuade, and refer. And I think what stands out the most for me, what I really got out of it before I decided I wanted to train, is dispelling the myths that people that I had. Like, you couldn't talk about it, or if I asked a person if they are thinking about suicide, then I'm putting it in their mind. And so I really love how it's a simple training. It talks about the myths. It talks about what it's okay for us to do. It talks about the do's and the don'ts. It gives us clues that we should be looking for, where before I used to think, oh, they're just joking about suicide, or they talk about it all the time because they want attention. Those are things that came to my mind, and little did I know that those are real clues. So I love how we talk about the different clues that we need to identify, and it's okay for us to ask people, are you really considering suicide? So it just kind of opens up, I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's so important for people to know it's a way to recognize when someone is really hurting. It's also a way to respond, and it's also a way to refer people. Even if we don't feel comfortable asking the question, we're given the proper resources to refer them to someone else.
And I think, myself, like most people, without trainings like that, we just don't know what to say, right? We
Right.
just don't know what to say. Even if we want to help, we're afraid to step in and help.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more about that training. So as you had mentioned about your personal experiences, what has brought you healing?
What brings me healing? First of all, my spiritual life. I mean, that is the foundation of who I am. Even though at one point, again, I was afraid, because I was experiencing so much darkness. I was afraid to talk about it. Like I thought because I was in church that I didn't have the right to have those feelings. However, because of what I've experienced, it's allowed me to get rid of that stigma. I would just say, who's in my spiritual circle. I can't speak for other churches, but it just allows me to let people know, you got to have a balance. Yeah, you can have that spiritual stuff, but if you are not emotionally or physically feeling right, you got to try to blend that together. And it's okay to help. It's okay to ask for help. And so that being able to connect those two or three together has helped me, and helping others and having these opportunities, and just knowing that even though I could not save some of the people that I have lost because of suicide, knowing I can do whatever I can to move forward to maybe make a difference in someone else's life.
Well, you may have already answered my next question. And this is another kind of open-ended one, but what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Just helping other people and turning my pain into purpose. When we don't feel like we have a purpose, then we feel hopeless. And so I just decided that I would do whatever I could to make a difference in other people's lives, and maybe be the change that I would have wanted when I was going through it.
And our last question for you, Stephanie, is if you could give any advice to someone who might be going through similar struggles right now, what would it be?
Just take it one day at a time. No day is promised to us. We just never know when our time is up. And a lot of times we spend so much time worrying about tomorrow that we miss out on today. And so every day that we can be intentional about being grateful for something, every day that we are allowed an opportunity to live, that means we still have an opportunity to have a purpose. And so we just have to be intentional, take it day by day, and find some gratitude in the day that we were granted. And if we could try to find or be intentional, and it's not based on feeling, because if we went by feelings, every day we would sink right back in that hole. But intentionally, if we just say, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I can to be grateful or find gratitude in something today. I'm going to create a great day, whether my situation, things are going to happen every day. And there's some things that are in our control, and there are some things that aren't. And so the things that we can control, which is what we do our best to just be grateful or find gratefulness in that day.
Very well said. And I couldn't agree with you more as far as the turning pain into purpose. I think that's very succinctly put, and I appreciate you sharing everything that you have. And I really enjoy teaching QPR with you. So thank you for sharing yourself with the community. You're helping a lot of people. Thank you. It's been great. And I
I can't wait to see what else is in store for us to make a difference.
Really want to again thank Stephanie for sharing her story. I know how much vulnerability and courage that can take. And I know this because I myself have struggled with suicidal thoughts. I am a suicide attempt survivor. So one of the resources that's also available in Calhoun County and elsewhere, since COVID began, I started a video series sharing my experiences with surviving a suicide attempt, where I talk about suicide prevention topics. Because what we know is that one of the things that can help people who have had thoughts of suicide or even survived an attempt in the past year, listening to other people who have been able to cope through the crisis, seek help, can really provide support for individuals who are struggling. So I want to share just a quick preview of that video series now. Research has shown a clearly identified need that we share more stories of survival. Stories of individuals who have had firsthand experiences with suicidal thoughts or even behaviors and have continued to persist, to survive, to live, to overcome. I believe that the word survivor denotes a sense of courage, of hardship, of resilience, and of strength. So what about you? If you've survived a suicide attempt, do you celebrate the anniversary? You know that over 90% of individuals who have survived a suicide attempt do not later die by suicide, but go on to lead meaningful lives. As we begin to identify and understand the ways in which suicidal thoughts function in our lives, we can become better able to deal with those thoughts and to find alternative strategies to meet our human needs. You have an immense power to heal. It does take time, but you will cherish so many moments along the way, and it will get better. No person on this earth is destined to die by suicide, including me. Your hope matters. Suicide is preventable. The warning signs, the subtle hints, even the overt cries for help often go unacknowledged or missed and are met with silence. But we can change this. Show the person that you care. Listen with empathy. Give them your time, your patience, and your caring presence. Just as there are things we can do to improve and maintain our general health, coping, and well-being, there are also things we can do to help us through those moments of acute crisis. So if you are someone who has struggled with thoughts of suicide, or if you've survived a suicide attempt, or if you have someone in your life that you're worried about, the first thing that I would recommend is that you practice using those crisis helplines yourself, or with that other person, increasing the amount of time and distance between a person and the lethal means with which that person might attempt suicide. And it saves lives. If there is a silver lining to this, it is that I am not speaking to you from a stance of shame right now. Shame, as I had mentioned in prior videos, can be life-threatening. What I am speaking of now is guilt, and it is a pro-social guilt. Multiple studies have now demonstrated that media portraying personal experiences of overcoming suicidal thoughts by use of positive coping strategies and help-seeking behaviors can have a protective effect against suicide. Now, this protective effect has been dubbed the Papageno effect. I believe that in many ways, shame leads to silence, and silence leads to more shame, but we can break that cycle. If you have been impacted by suicide, whether you've personally experienced thoughts of suicide, or survived a suicide attempt, if you've supported a loved one who's struggled, or if you have lost a loved one to suicide, I hope that when you hear my story, you can also feel that strength in numbers. So let us be vulnerable, let us be courageous, and let us support one another by speaking the unspeakable together. Next up, we're going to hear from another one of our community members who's been impacted by suicide, Henrietta. So please listen. I'm here with one of our community members, Henrietta. Henrietta, thanks for speaking with us, sharing with us.
Thank you.
So just to start off, I want to ask, how has your life been impacted by suicide?
Right now, I'm a peer support. So I work with people that have suicidal ideations, and in the past, it was a personal it was a personal issue with myself.
So supporting others, but you've been in those shoes, which to me, from where I'm coming from, tells me you're probably a good fit to help others.
I like to think so, but I also try to allow people to find their own sources. You know, what works for me may not work for somebody else, but I guess I look at it, the more options we can find, the greater the strides that are made.
So it's good to keep in mind what's worked for you is not necessarily going to work for everybody. We're all individuals and we all have differences.
Right. I have people ask, you know, well, what did you do? And my response generally is, you know, we can't look at that because we're so different. And while we walk a similar path, they're not the same path. And in the beginning, sometimes it's hard to understand that concept, but knowing that somebody's walking that path with you generally helps to start it. I think it's that first step to move forward that's always the hardest.
So given that you, as your role in peer support and helping others, and also your personal experience of struggles, and this is a pretty open-ended question, but what does suicide prevention mean to you?
So this one I thought about actually. And the word prevention is a little intimidating. And so I had to think back, what would have prevented this? And it was fear. You know, there was so much fear around the subject, around admitting, asking, which goes to the stigma of suicide, mental health, and nobody wanting to say anything. Everybody would, you know, it's under the thing. So for me, the prevention is having this dialogue, making it where it's not so scary, where the stigma, I don't know if I can fully say stigma will ever be totally gone, but can we make it where it's not as big? So I think that's where I start with prevention, is trying to take some of the fear away.
And one of the primary ways it sounds like to do that is just by what we're doing basically right now, is talking about it. Yeah.
It is, because it takes the it makes it where it's okay to say I'm struggling, that I'm not okay, knowing that you're not going to pull back because you're afraid you might say the wrong thing, or you're afraid you may push me in a direction, or anybody. And sometimes that's when it's pushing people away, then the service, it's a disservice. So I try, when I'm working with somebody, not to say I don't understand, because it's not my place, but to try to see it where they are, because it's just as scary for them to say it as it is for me to hear it.
Yeah, and I think just how you said, we might not ever be able to totally erase stigma. I think it's probably fair to say we also might never be able to totally remove that fear, because suicide, the idea that somebody could be here one day and take their own in life and not be here the next. I think there's always going to be some fear around that, but by talking about it, we can go a long ways to reduce that and actually be there for that person. The follow-up question to that I have is, in your experiences, what you've experienced for yourself or seen with others, what do you think leads to healing?
I think a lot is acceptance that somebody is hurting so much that this is an option. And people don't understand that depth of hurt. And so it's kind of dismissed. So to open that door and have that acceptance that I may not get it, but I get you. And to sit in that walk. Because if you don't have anybody to talk to, then there is no movement. And if you don't try, to see the other side, then we don't get anywhere anyway.
And I think if you don't try to see that other side, that other person on that other side probably still feels just as alone as they did before.
Sorry. Yeah. I think that's that healing, is somebody beginning to feel that they're not alone. But people say, but you have other people there. And I get that from some of the people I work with. I'm not alone, there's other people, but there's a difference between being alone by yourself and being alone with other people. And it takes two different dynamics to address each one of those.
What gives you hope?
I think what gives me the most hope is that things will change. And when I say things, I'm not talking about the environment, I'm talking me. I'm talking as my job. Can I do something for somebody else? How do we get to the point where they can see their light? Because it's their tunnel. And knowing somebody else is there, does it give them strength? But hope is that path. Hope is, if I fall down, somebody's going to be here with me to pick it up. So hope is like a star for me. Sometimes it's like I told somebody, that star, you only think about looking for them in the dark, but the stars are out all the time. We just have to look harder. And sometimes people don't understand that there's stars out during the day. So hope is looking for a star.
That's so very well stated. Thank you for I've never heard it put that way, so thank you for sharing that. I have one final question, and kind of relates to those out there that might have loved ones in their lives that might struggle with thoughts of suicide. So if you could give any advice to someone who might be helping to support someone in their life right now, what would it be?
Is don't pull away, because you're probably going to hear something you don't want to hear, or you're going to see something you don't want to see. But in the same time, make sure you take care of yourself, because this is not an easy one word fix. This is a journey, and you have to be able to take care of yourself before you can pack to go on the journey. So, stay for that trip, and do what you need to do for you, because it's not being selfish for you to listen and to what you need while you're giving somebody else what they need. So one of the examples I use, because I think in pictures, is you are like a watering can, and the things that you deal with, which would be, this person, is your flowers. And they're healthy and they're strong and they grow because you keep watering them. But if you don't fill your watering can up, you can't water your plants. So they're not going to grow. They're not going to be what you want them to be, because you're out of water. And it's okay to take and refill your watering can. So that's how I look at life, is, do I need to fill up my watering can?
Yeah, it's a question we should all ask. Well, thank you so much. I know I said that was the last question, but I just had the thought, I mean, your role in peer support is so important for people. I think for people who might really be struggling, feeling like they're seen, helping people to feel understood, like they're not alone. Do you mind sharing, if you don't mind sharing, just a little bit more about what peer support is? And I know you, through your role as through Summit Point, but if you could just tell us a little bit more about that, I think people would really benefit from hearing.
So the way I look at peer support, is working, or not even working. I don't look at it as working, but walking with someone to help empower themselves to take back their life. Now, the journey, it is a journey. It's life's journey. It's not easy. Life is going to show up, but how do we build the resiliency to deal with what we are going to encounter? Does it mean if I get over or work through a problem, it's never going to come back? No, but maybe I've learned something this time that'll let me move a little bit longer. So for me, it's all about finding your voice, living your life for you, and enjoying it as it comes. And then figuring out the things that I didn't think I could do, I can. So that's what a peer support is to me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us. You are greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
We can all resonate with that message of just how important it is to know that there's somebody there, to not feel alone. So for our third and final community member who's going to share with us, Ginny, who has been impacted by suicide, is going to share her story with you now. And right now we are meeting with Ginny Hafner. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you. Just to start out, if you could share a little bit about how your life has been impacted by suicide.
My family has been impacted by suicide on 3 different counts. One is my cousin's son, a stepson of mine, and my only biological child named Brian. For that, I'm going to concentrate solely on him so it's not confusing to people who exactly I'm speaking of and how my life was significantly impacted. My son was a veteran of the Persian Gulf War, and when he passed, I was in Michigan here with my folks during a community event for a church that was doing a fundraiser. And he was in Ohio, and I had absolutely no means of communicating with him that night. At that time, there was no internet, there was no text, there was no cell phone. And it's always laid heavy on my heart that had I been in Ohio that night, that perhaps his life could have been saved, because we were very close and he had gotten in a fight with his girlfriend and I could have helped him through that. But the night that he passed, and I found out that he had died, my choice was I could either let it consume me or else I could use his life to help other people because he lived. And that's what I had chosen to do. I have been a champion for mental health as well as suicide ever since. My son's lived with bipolar disorder, and I do believe with all my heart that the night that he passed, it was the bipolar disorder that took his life. Suicidal death is not much different than a body ravaged by cancer. It's the illness that kills them. My perception of suicide changed dramatically, and I have come to appreciate the courage it takes for people to live with mental health conditions, as well as wanting them to be free of the struggles and the pains that they go through every day. Back in the day, and my son died in the 90s, Andy Rooney had written a very scathing commentary on 60 Minutes about Kurt Cobain's death. And being the champion I had become, I wrote him a letter telling him how I really felt that he was misinformed as to what suicide was and the pain people are in because of the life that they're living at that time. And in response, he never sent me a letter directly, but he had a stack of letters, maybe 12 inches high, of people that were speaking out against his commentary, and maybe 2 or 3 letters in support of it. But I do believe that there is a positive to everything in this world. And in order to find a positive to his life, I had to make a choice of how I wanted to change my life. And I was working in a family business at that time. And his death really altered my life direction because I gave my life to a prayer that was answered. And when his mind became disadvantaged, my prayer was, help heal his mind, Lord, please. And when his mind wasn't healed and he passed, it wasn't why did he die, it was why did he live. So never any anger at God, just direct me, show me what I need to do, because he did live. So that's when I became involved in suicide, families that have lived with suicide, people who have attempted suicide. Anytime that I can be of help to them, that's what my direction in life has become.
And speaking to that, like you said, you made that choice, I'm going to use this to help others. If you could share, and this is a very open-ended question, so feel free to respond in any way that it strikes you, but what does suicide prevention mean to you?
To me, it's a resource, it's a tool that people can use, be it someone who has attempted, or it could be a family member that was left behind. And what we do is we're going to offer advantages to them, resources, direction that they can utilize to help them navigate the system, as well as to help soothe their journey and the feelings that they have because of it.
And speaking of resources, you currently run a support group for families. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that? And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Survivors of Loss support group that we will be developing. Okay. But could you, if you could share a little bit about the group that you currently run?
I'd be happy to. I started leading a support group back in 1996. And when I relocated to Michigan after my retirement, I started a group that I run at Oakland Hospital in the Wright Medical Building for families who have loved ones living with mental health conditions. And oftentimes we will have someone that will attend that has lost a loved one to suicide, and they are absolutely welcome. It was interesting when the COVID pandemic started, there was no opportunity to be together face to face. So had been running them by Zoom and had been running them twice a month. And it was very interesting because at the very beginning, people were so pleased with the way their loved ones had been responding to the pandemic. Well, we finally figured it out. They had been in treatment. They had the resources, the toolkit to use to help them navigate what they were going through. Even though the socialization had taken a nosedive, they still had their toolbox to go to. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see how well therapy and ongoing treatment works. However, as the pandemic lingered on, there became some more problems.
Yeah, and as far as that support, I assume just also building that sense of community is probably one of the things that's important. So you and I and some other community members have been talking about starting a group specifically for survivors of suicide loss. Is that something that you've had experience in ever participating in? And do you, I guess, what do you think of the best top values do you think that might be as far as benefits for others?
For the past 24 years, I've been teaching a course called Family to Family. It is a program for families that have loved ones with mental health conditions. And I had a couple that lived in Hillsdale that attended. And shortly thereafter, there had been a rash of suicides in the community. And they had asked me if I would come and train people how to run a support group for survivors of suicide. So I did. I developed it and I went and I presented it for them. This is something that I am willing to do for our community. But something else I'm willing to do that I have done for the last 10 years or so is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. That's an organization that I started here. We run 2 community awareness events a year, and it's held at the Cool Family Center. And the one that I would like to have happen would be for NAMI to arrange it, and then for the Suicide Coalition to take part and let the community know that we exist. It's a way to give our coalition identity as well as NAMI. So people cannot take advantage of what we offer if they don't know we exist. So this is something that I look forward to doing as soon as we can arrange it. So what it would be is just an opportunity for families and for agencies, for those that have attempted to come and learn more about the coalition and how it can be of advantage to them.
I will look forward to being a part of that.
Of course you will.
And just a note on because you had mentioned having supported other loss survivors and supporting people who have survived a suicide attempt. So I just wanted to talk just briefly, just a note, sometimes we use the phrase survivor of suicide, and that can mean different things. So many times for loss and bereavement support groups, they often use that phrase, but then that phrase survivor of suicide, people can also apply it and use it for suicide attempt survivors. So that's one of the things that I need to remember to really disambiguate. So I'm glad you triggered that thought with me. But you had kind of mentioned the things that were helping people even through the supports through COVID. And speaking of the support groups and the trainings, what has brought you healing?
What has brought me healing are the families and the individuals that have benefited from my experience with it. And I had a young man call me at midnight one night, and he was suicidal. And I was able to, after 2 hours of talking with him, agree to have me transport him to the hospital. And I hear from him every Mother's Day, and he sends me pictures of his children. And he says to me that, you were part of my strength. These children wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. So just the lives that have been spared because my family members lived, I would have never gotten into mental health and certainly not suicide awareness had they not. So my prayer was answered because God led me to what I need to be doing in using their lives to help other people. So it tells me that loved ones who lost their lives have not died in vain. And that's very healing to me to know that other people have been spared because they lived.
Well, I'm also very much hearing that they're also not really gone. They're still here in the work that you're doing.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Years ago, I went and I heard Laurie Schiller speak, and she wrote a book on the quiet room. And she had appeared on Larry King's program. And upon reading his book, or her book, he said, I understand that you were suicidal. And her mother took her hand and went like that. And her mother said, she's too smart for that. Well, I got a lot of calls that night because there were a lot of people that were very angry because of her misinterpretation of it. Person does not have to be stupid to take their life. They have to be desperate. And my son was reading at 3.5. He was an honor student. He was a good athlete. It was all the things that it took for him to have a good character. And he did very well. He excelled in the Navy. So it's not a matter of stupidity. It's just a matter of desperation. And I helped her to understand that. And I quoted her what I said earlier, for a person living with mental illness, suicidal death is not much different than a body ravaged by cancer, ALS, MS, heart disease, etc. And I call those, not to diminish their value, but I call those the more bona fide illnesses because people do not respect mental illness. It's much better than it was when our first family member was diagnosed 45 years ago, but there still has to be a lot of understanding. My perception of suicide really changed the more I became educated. I attended every seminar I could on mental health, on suicide. I even put together all-day seminars on suicide when I was working for NAMI, Ohio.
As far as mentioning suicide rates, mentioning COVID and the barriers that there might still be out there, just with that in mind, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope are the lives that have been spared because the boys lived. That gives me hope. It gives me hope that now with our coalition and as people are learning more and more about it, that they will have that additional resource that can help them perhaps save their life. And that is very hopeful for me, for them, because that wasn't around years ago.
Well, I have one final question for you. And again, thank you so much for speaking to us, to our community. The question is, if you could give any advice to someone who might have recently lost or even in the past has lost a loved one to suicide, what would that be?
One thing when I do present on suicide, I haven't done it so much around here, but when I was in Ohio and traveling the whole state, part of my presentation on suicide would be, you can do everything right by your loved one. You can do everything according to the book, what you should do to try and help them through their angst, but you cannot be their savior. Just can't. If they are that desperate enough, nothing you can say or do is going to save their life. But that said, I always say, plant the seeds, hope that they grow. So in a lucid moment, they can call up the love and the nurturing that you have for them and stay alive. But that's another thing I tell my families is that mental illness is so powerful. It's stronger, more pervasive than all the love, all the nurturing, all the parenting that we can give someone we love, even though they are desperate. The opportunity comes, they take it, and then we are left behind. But another thing I would advise is grieve at your own pace. Don't let somebody tell you this is what you need to do, this is what you don't need to do. And the thing that always warms my heart is when they share memories with me. Just at the end of June, I went to West Milton, Ohio, which is where I lived in the past. That's where my son graduated high school. And he has been gone almost 28 years. And two of his classmates put a banner up with his Navy picture. And they had different generations of wars where people were being honored. But had it been just recently, I would have been touched. But I was so heartened because it's been so many years and they didn't forget him. So just keeping the memory alive is so important. And one of his well-intentioned friends had said to me, "Oh, I know how you feel. You know, my grandma died." You can't compare that in any way, shape, or form. So just be there for somebody. If you don't say a word, if you just touch their shoulder, give them a hug, give them a smile. Sometimes words aren't necessary.
And those little things that might be the seed, that might be that seed of hope, or that the lifeline. And like you said, you never know who might be going through that at any moment.
And
Well,
you don't know. I've had people tell me they were in the shower and all of a sudden, without provocation, a suicidal ideation came to them. So it doesn't have to be something that is stressful. It doesn't have to be something that is just really prying on their mind. It's just that all of a sudden that urge, I don't want to be around anymore. So, you know, you never know what somebody's going through. A smile can hide a lot of emotion.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to remember that we can survive thoughts of suicide. We should take those as a signal of distress or
Right.
pain. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. And I do want to just say how profound the thought of, it's not asking why did he die? Why did they die? Why did he live? And I think that's beautiful. So thank you
That
so
was
much for sharing.
my answer. He lived for a purpose. Thank you, Scott. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. It was great to see you.
I again want to just reiterate that powerful message, that powerful sentiment. Rather than asking the question, why did they die? Asking the question, why did they live? Remembering that they lived, how they lived, and that their life was meaningful, that they still live with us, I think is extremely important. So grateful for that message. And this does wrap up our World Suicide Prevention Day event. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're joining us live today or if you're going to watching this at a later date. If you are joining us on World Suicide Prevention Day, we are just about to start our candle ceremony. Again, people from across the world all day lighting a candle in a window. So if you are able to visit us at our pickup event and get an SPCCC candle, please light that. And if you don't have that and have another candle you can light, please join us in lighting a candle in your window now. I hope you have a great night, a great weekend. We're so grateful that you're here.